Well, trying to get some drainage ditches in today. So I gotta kind of rough things out. It's gonna look kind of ugly, but that's where you gotta start so this stuff dries out some. You know, machine runs beautifully. So I'm just gonna turn the camera on and go dig and dig and dig. Well, we're up here about maybe 800 feet. This is about the halfway point. And what I'm going to do is I got a ditch line down all the way down to the road, as you can see, and I got one on the other side as well. But I have this ditch, that's the first one I did, that goes out and then down, daylights in the grass. So this has been picking up a little bit water been running. And he wants a pond right there. I'm going to dig all that garbage out right there. I'll throw it down over here somewhere. I'm going to dig out his pond because we're going to put a ditch line that way. In order to run water towards his cows, he needs some water. And try to dry this whole section out right here. And then what I'm going to do is let this sit for a while. Just let it sit until I can get down in here with my dump truck. Where you're looking right here, from this section right down to where I finished digging right there, this is all swamp. I mean, this was just all spongy. Right to about where those trees are. But that area there, I had to dig it all out because it's just all spongy stuff down for about 3 feet. It gets a little bit better once I get to the end here, and then all the way up there is material that when it dries out, you see that yellow stuff, when it dries out it'll be pretty good. But all that stuff there where it's darker colored, that was all like loam. That's why it was so spongy in there. So I had to excavate all of it out, and we're going to backfill this whole area with shale, and then top it with a road base. But you got to dig that soft stuff away. You got to dig the grass and the root mass and all that darker stuff. Get a better look right here. We can see where I dug down to the yellow. The yellow is where it turns to hard pan. So you have to get all that darker colored stuff off if you're going to build a road. It just simply won't be stable. What a mess. That was all soup. So I just wanted to hack it out. I wasn't looking for pretty. I just wanted to hack it out so it can start drying out. You know, in order to build a road, you got to make a mess first. This time next year it'll look pretty nice. But it's just one guy, one hoe, one little tiny truck, instead of a dozer and a big excavator and a whole bunch of dump trucks moving material. Now, where I used to work county, we'd have this done in about a week. You know, throw enough people at it, big enough equipment, it happens in a hurry. When you just got one farmer and a farm tractor and a little dinky hoe, it takes a little bit longer. But I'm having fun. I'm going to give it a shot and see if I can get down the road. I'm putting the weed whacker away for the day. Dug a little bit of a holding pond and a bunch of ditches, and we're supposed to get a bunch of rain tonight. Ratty old thing. But I'll tell you what, we're getting work done with it. Got the cover on the exhaust and shot some grease in there and dug the mud out of the tracks best I could. Now, one thing I know for a fact is I'm not going back up. So we dug that ditch right there. Dug that little holding pond right there. It's already got water in it. Ditches are draining. I think if I get past this section right here, I'll be all right. All right, I took this thing up here and just did a couple of passes just so I could knock down some of the rocks and things and the rough stuff. So let's just take a walk. This is not the camera, this is my phone. But basically I've gotten through this swamp. You know, the rest of this up here, that's really not going to be that bad. I'll wrap that out in a day or two. But getting through the swamp and getting the drainage going was a major task. I've got this ditch on the right hand side because there's water leaching from that side there. So as it daylights, it'll come up in the ditch and go down the ditch. But it may not show with a camera, but I've got this graded off to my left. And as we walk down through here, you'll see that I've got a place for the water to get off right there. And a little holding pond. Now what's going to happen with that is I'm going to actually take another ditch and carry it down to my neighbor's cows. He needs the water for his cows. So I've agreed to put a ditch there for him, bring that water right down to him. And there's a second place where it can go. So again, it'll come down this left-hand side if it leaches onto the road and go off there. Now the second thing about this whole deal, this is not the final shape. All I'm doing right here is draining. This is about drainage. And once we get this to dry out some, then I'm going to actually shape the road more like a crown, like your conventional road would be. But we're going to backfill with a lot of shale first, and then a road base, an engineered road base after that. So this is ugly, but it's about drainage. That's what this is about. Probably doesn't really make a lot of sense to do too much, you know, until things dry out some. And just so there's no mistaking, I'm not trying to actually cut the road at this point. I'm just trying to get the ditching in. That's the game here. It may look like a mess for a while, but until I get things to drain, I really can't build the road. Let's get that fired up and stretch out that track a little bit with a grease gun.
Well, I guess the farm road is now officially open, seeing as I can get down the road with a truck, pickup truck, and I gotta go and check on the excavator before the storm comes in. I'm not gonna run anything today. I think I've done enough. Pretty much have to let things dry out at this point, which kind of was the plan. I kind of got a little more ambitious, but I had to bust it open in order to let it dry. Otherwise, it'd be muddy all the way until July, you know. It's pretty cold this morning. It says it's like 25 degrees. Everything's all froze. So I'm gonna get down here and put a cap on the excavator and dump some gear oil in the swing gearbox because it seems like it's leaking. Really can't do much by cleaning the tracks because right now it's all frozen ice, which is also why I don't feel like running it this morning. I don't want to burn all that ice through the tracks and risk pitching the track off because I can't get it clean. But I started going through the numbers. You know, when I first got into this road job, I knew it was going to take me a month or two. And then you get into it and realize, yeah, it's going to take a month or two. And part of what it is you got to think volume, right? And if I've got off the top of my head roughly 1,300 foot long, 14 foot wide, you know, you multiply that and divide it by 27 in order to get cubic yards, assuming 1 foot deep. There's roughly 700 cubic yards of material that I got to haul off site. All right, so you figure 700. And my little dump truck takes 7 yards. Well, guess what? There's 100 loads of material that I've already cut off that I have to haul off that site. And if you figure 25, 30 loads a day, you were looking at a couple of days of hauling just right there, just to remove the spoils. Because what I plan to do is take all the spoils that I cut off that drive, that road, and move it up and let it dry out because it'll be good dirt for other projects. And then another 100 loads back because I want to take the dry material off the hill and build the road back up with the drier material after I've cut the base in. And what I did is I'm basically cutting the loose dirt off the hard pan because it's a loamy soil and it'll never really compact to make a road base. So by cutting all the way down to the hard pan and then building up from there, I have a fairly solid four-wheel drive. I'm on ice. See, the problem here is starting right about here, off to the right, you can see that it's wet. It's froze now, so it doesn't look wet, but it is all the way down. So the source of the water is way up here. So I'm going to have to build a trench line alongside that fence all the way down and connect with the ones that I did coming up to capture all the water. Got to tighten up those tracks on that excavator when things warm up a little bit and I can get in there with the grease gun. A bit slack. But when you're building a road out in a place like this, see that darker material, that loamy material? That's good topsoil. See that yellow mixed with rock? That's a clay. And when it dries, it's really, really hard. So the trick is to dig down to where you can get drainage. And what happens is the water leaches along between the two layers, between that brown and that yellow. So you got to actually break down into the yellow material so that when the water leaches out, it actually gets into a ditch, right, for the drainage. And if you can dry that out, that yellow stuff out, it'll make a good road. Then the key is, once you have it dried out, is to keep it dry. And that's where an engineered material like a good road base works. Because once we have this dried out and crowned and compacted, then I can top it with like a 3/4 minus Class A road base, and that'll shed the water. I'll probably use limestone, and that'll shed the water to the sides and not let this get saturated again and remains hard during the, you know, the 4 seasons. But that's the trick. The trick to a road is keeping it dry. And out here, that means making sure you have the ditches deep enough to break between the 2 layers of soil between that top and that hard pan, so it leaches through the top soil across the top of the hard pan into the ditch. Alright, just kind of checking on the progress to see whether or not things are drying out. And it looks to me like it's drying out pretty quickly. Alright, temperature has come up a little bit, and I took a couple of days off, so I didn't have a whole lot of progress. But last night I came in and I started shaping this hill, and it presents a couple of issues that you really can't see on the camera, but there was a wet area that was actually artesian out of the ground that I had to sort of work around, which is why it's doing what it's doing. And there's a wet spot up in there, so there'll be a trench that goes from there all the way down to the coming up out of the ground. I'm going to have to accentuate this ditch a little bit here to get that out of there. Draining the swamp, that's what this is. But I figured I'm going to record the first trip up the road. It's going to pour rain a little bit later, so I've got a very short window of opportunity where I can go up and back. So I wanted to do that, and I know I have a little bit of a problem up here, but I just want to document the first trip up the road. Who knows, if I get stuck, I'll document that too, right? This is where it's going to be a little bit dicey. Once I get through this darker area here, it goes back to that yellow stuff, I should be fine. So that's what I got to get to. No problem. Look at that. This is pretty steep right here. This is a lot steeper than it looks. So this is the first trip up and down this road. And I got a lot of work to do, and I know it. But I guess it's a victory of sorts being able to do this. Packed it a little bit too. How's that? I think the really cool thing is I'm doing it in two-wheel drive. I had my little trout stream before that I worked on with a shovel, and I got it running pretty good. And that's going to help an awful lot, just getting the water out from underneath the road. Well, it rained all last night, so every place I want to work right now is full of mud. So the road project needs to get put on hold, and I'm afraid the get-together we had planned tomorrow to try to clear some trees, I'm afraid that's going to have to be put on hold as well. I kind of want to do something a little different, that's all. So what I'll do is we'll just put the camera up here in the boat, and take this setup from last year, kind of a cheap ultralight setup that seems to work okay. And I already had a lure on it, so I just figured I'd pick it up and pull it out of the truck, and because that's where it was, and cast out there and see if we can train some fish. That one. Good one. Yeah, it's a nice bass for this place. There we go. Trying to put together 6 of these threaded jacks for a fella, and I'll get a pictorial record of the different sizes and drills and stuff like that for those who care. This is a M10 by 1 reverse thread for 61s and 272s and stuff like that, right? Here is a M10 by 1 standard right hand thread, and this works on that steel MS 660 crank, but also on some of the older Husqvarna flywheel sides on their crank. For example, this one right here. So these two here cover the old Husqvarnas. This is an old John Fred 670 case. So that means 61s are covered, flywheel side of the MS 660. This is an M12 by 1.25 reverse. So that covers the other side of the steel MS 660, and I believe it covers a couple of Husqvarnas. I can't remember which ones. And then, of course, you have the M8 by 1, which is on a lot of the Husqvarnas. A lot of the different Huskies have got that. And then for the Husqvarna 372, 385, 390, the M14 by 1.25 reverse. So that's what I've got. What I'm missing, and I don't have a crank to test it on, is that other size, which is the M10 by 1.5, I think it is. Reverse thread. Because there's a chance I've got that tap. I've got a couple of coarse thread, reverse thread M10s in here. So I have a 357 XP carcass right here with a good clutch. So what we're going to do is pull the clutch off. It has a coarse thread. Very coarse thread. Take a look at that. See if you can see that with the camera. Bar oil. You wonder where my bar oil goes I dump out of saws to work on? Right in here. I guess I really never thought about doing these for all the different Husqvarna saws because I figured most people would just buy the standard, Husqvarna shop tools, because they're cheap. They're like $40, $50 delivered. And my stuff costs more. And really what I was trying to do with mine is to get that Husqvarna level of cleverness in utility and ease of use into the steel kit saws. That was where mine was headed in the beginning, And I don't get it, but people buy them who even have the Husqvarna stuff, and I think the simple reason is mine are a little easier to use because they're a little bit longer, so you can work a little bit further away from the cases. And they're not hyper expensive. I mean, $100 a set. And a guy does a lot of these saws, at $50 is nothing. Son of a bitch. Well, it works, right?